Once upon a time, there lived two sisters who lived completely different lives. Their names were Tife and Yemisi, and people often wondered if they were truly blood sisters. Tife, the older sister, was a school dropout who married a man 20 years older than herself. Her younger sister Yemisi was well educated and worked in a multinational corporation. The sisters were not particularly close, as Tife often appeared distant and indifferent towards her younger sister Yemisi. One day, Yemisi returned home to visit their parents. She met Tife in the house and decided to share her exciting news. "I'm getting married," she said with a bright smile on her face. Their parents leaped for joy, hugging and congratulating her for the news. In a calm but joyful voice, Yemisi continued, revealing to them that she was also pregnant. The room fell silent as the joy that once filled the room disappeared. Yemisi sat there confused as she wondered why her parents were suddenly quiet. After what felt like forever, her father spoke up and informed her to bring the man that had piqued an interest in marrying her. Tife could not hold back her anger. She stood up and stared at her parents, asking if they were going to sit back and watch this happen. "I knew it," Tife said as she clenched her fist, her voice trembling with bitterness as she bared her mind to everyone that was present. Tife accused Yemisi of trying to mock her childlessness. "I knew you would stop at nothing to rub my predicament in my face. You got pregnant just to mock my childlessness," she said to Yemisi, who stood there frozen and unable to speak. Her smiles fading as she stared at her sister in disbelief. "Tife, how could you even think that?" Yemisi asked softly as she tried to calm her sister down. Their parents stood there confused, unsure of how to calm the storm that was now brewing between their daughters. But Tife had not finished bearing her mind. "All my life, I've been the one everyone hated, the one everyone whispered about behind closed doors. And now, you, perfect, successful Yemisi, have now come to mock my pain. You've even taken everything from me. And now, you've come to make a ridicule of my situation." Yemisi's eyes filled with tears as she stepped closer to her sister. "Tife, I have never ever tried to compete with you. I have never wished you harm for one day in my life. I only came here to share my joy with you, my family." But Tife turned away, tears pouring down her eyes as she stormed out of the house, leaving behind an awkward silence that pierced the heart of everyone present. Yemisi never got to understand why her sister Tife hated her this much. She sat there confused as she watched her mother speak to her sister on the phone, tell her to abort that pregnancy if she ever wants peace in this family. Tife said to her mother as she hung up the phone. Yemisi stood there frozen as she overheard her sister's demands over the phone. The joy of her pregnancy, as well as her upcoming marriage, was overshadowed by her sister's bitterness. Yemisi tried to shake off the pain, telling herself that Tife was simply hurting and didn't mean her words, but deep inside, Yemisi knew that Tife was dead serious. Their parents decided to call for a family meeting to address the issues between Tife and her sister, but Tife refused to show up to the meeting. Yemisi, being so loving and kind, decided to pay her sister a visit at home to see if she could have a word with her. She knocked on Tife's door repeatedly, but Tife refused to let her in. Yemisi, determined to have a word with her sister, stood there as she sang her sister's favorite song repeatedly. She remembered how Tife always loved to sing the song to her when they were little and believed that Tife would have a change of heart when she heard the song, but her plan did not work out as she planned. Tife angrily walked out of the house and poured her a bucket of soapy water. She warned her never to come to her house again, informing her that she was dead to her. Yemisi watched as Tife banged the door to her face, her entire body drenched in soapy water, as she turned around and walked away. The neighbors peeked through their windows as they whispered amongst themselves. They could not understand why Tife hated her younger sister this much. Tife had spent years building walls around herself, shutting her sister out completely. To her, Yemisi was a symbol of everything that she had lost: opportunities, affection, and now even the dream of motherhood. In Tife's eyes, Yemisi had taken everything from her. She believed their parents loved Yemisi more, praising her more, and overlooked her own struggles. Tife had convinced herself that her sister was to blame for every misfortune in her life. Yemisi was so heartbroken. She could not contain her tears. She loved her sister so much and wished that things were different between them. She returned home and decided to speak to her fiancé, who advised her to stay away from her sister for now. How can your sister suggest that you abort her baby? Is it because she has no child of her own? He asked Yemisi, who burst out in tears and began to cry. Weeks passed and their wedding preparations began. Yemisi tried severally to reach her sister, but Tife refused to pick her calls. She left so many messages and Tife never responded to any of them. Yemisi decided to pay her sister a visit again. This time, she hoped to deliver her wedding invitation to her, hoping that she attends her wedding, which was now in a few weeks. But Tife ignored her persistent knocks. Yemisi then decided to slide the card underneath the door. She left a small note with the card, apologizing to Tife for anything that she could have done. Yemisi stood outside the door for a moment, hoping for any sign of acknowledgement from Tife, but the silence remained unbroken. With a heavy heart, Yemisi turned and walked away. She left her apology resting on the other side of the door as she returned home, hopeful that things would change. The day of their wedding finally arrived, and Yemisi looked so stunning in her wedding dress. Her face was glowing with happiness, despite the sadness that lingered in her eyes. Yemisi left one seat empty in the front row, hoping until the very last moment that Tife would walk through the door and be part of their special day. But as expected, her sister Tife never showed up. She was seated in her living room, watching a television program whilst her sister's wedding was ongoing. She could not bring herself to attend the wedding, knowing that her sister was pregnant. Tife could feel the bitterness in her heart. She could not help but blame her younger sister for all the things that she had been through in life. Her in-laws made her life a living hell. They blamed Tife for her childlessness and made a mockery of her at every given opportunity. Whenever someone in the family announced their pregnancy, Tife's mother-in-law would make mocking remarks at her. She constantly compared Tife to her co-wives, who were educated, had children, and seemed to bring pride to the family. The comparisons were relentless, with her mother-in-law asking why she chose to be useless. Whenever there was an important family celebration, Tife was either given menial tasks in the background or outrightly excluded from attending. She often sat at home alone, whilst her husband and his family celebrated without her. On one occasion, during a family party, her sister-in-law openly mocked her for not being able to conceive. "Maybe you should try some herbal remedies," she said loudly, causing others to laugh, whilst Tife stood frozen with embarrassment. Whenever she visited her in-laws in their home, they treated her like a maid. Tife was expected to cook, clean, and serve everyone without rest, whilst her sister-in-laws relaxed and enjoyed themselves. Even her husband began to neglect her feelings, often ignoring the fact that his family despised and ridiculed her. One morning, Tife received a text from her sister informing her that she was at the hospital. Her baby was coming, and Yemisi wished for Tife to be around. "I am naming her after you, Tifeoluwa," the message read, as Yemisi told her sister how much she loved her. Tife sat there with the message in her hand. She could not believe that her sister planned on naming her baby after her. "What nonsense is this?" she said to herself angrily as she got dressed and headed to the hospital. Tife saw this move as the height of mockery. She decided to head to the hospital to warn Yemisi not to name her child after her. She got into the car and drove to the hospital, which was an hour away from her home. When she arrived at the hospital, she met her mother and brother-in-law in tears. Her sister Yemisi had just passed, leaving her newborn daughter and husband behind. Tife froze as the words sank in. Her mother's sobs echoed in her ears, and her brother-in-law sat on the hospital bench, his face buried in his hands. The anger she had brought with her, the fire that fueled her journey to the hospital, dissolved into cold ashes. "No, it can't be," Tife whispered, clutching her chest as though trying to hold her heart together. She stood there shaking as she watched her mother approach. "She loved you, Tife. She loved you so much. Even in her final moment, she asked for you," her mother said with tears in her eyes. Tife's body shook as the guilt pierced her soul. All the anger, the resentment, the wall she had built around herself crumbled like a fragile sandcastle against an unyielding tide. "She wanted to name her baby after you, Tife," her mother continued through her tears. "She said it was her way of showing you how much she loved you, despite everything that had happened." The weight of those words felt unbearable. Tife had spent so long resenting her sister Yemisi, believing she had stolen her happiness, that she never paused to see the love her sister had for her. And now she stood there, wishing that she acted better, but it was already too late. The door to Yemisi's hospital room was slightly ajar, and Tife walked in to see her sister's lifeless body laying on the hospital bed, her face serene as though she had simply fallen asleep. Her newborn baby lay in the corner asleep as Tife approached them with shaky hands. Tife looked down at the child, whose name was also Tife Olua. Her heart broke into 1,000 pieces as she felt the weight of her sister's love. "I'm so sorry," Tife whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't see. I didn't realize how much you loved me. I let my pain blind me, and now you're gone." Tife broke down in tears as the nurse gently escorted her out of the hospital ward. Her mother stood at the door, silently watching the scene. She had never seen Tife so vulnerable in her life and knew that she contributed to her pain. She approached Tife and apologized for all the horrible things that she did to her. Tife stood there broken as she felt the whole world collapse in on her. Everyone saw her as a bitter woman, not knowing that beneath her bitterness was a story. It all began so many years ago when Tife fell in love with a young man named Obiora. He was kind, hardworking, and full of dreams. Their love was pure, and despite their financial struggles, they believed they could build a life together. When Tife found out that she was pregnant, she was terrified but hopeful. She thought Obiora would marry her and they would start a family together. But when she shared the news with her parents, everything began to go south. "You can't disgrace this family, Tife. You will not have a child out of wedlock," her father said. Her mother cried bitterly, lamenting how the family name would be dragged through the mud. They forced Tife to have an abortion, telling her it was for her own good. Obiora, devastated by the news, gathered the courage to formally ask for Tife's hand in marriage, but her parents rejected him outrightly because of his state of origin. "We can't let our daughter marry someone from there," her father said coldly as he chased Obiora away, warning him never to step his foot in their home again. Obiora left heartbroken, and Tife's world shattered before her eyes. Out of desperation, Tife planned to run away with Obiora. They planned on starting over somewhere far away, where no one knew who they were, but young Yemisi, who was only 10 at the time, overheard her sister's plans and innocently told their parents, thinking that she was protecting Tife from doing something wrong. That night, Tife was beaten mercilessly. Her father's belt left deep marks on her skin, and her mother's words cut even deeper than the scars. "You are a disgrace to this family," her mother said as she locked her in her room for days. Obiora eventually left the city and Tife never saw him again. Her mother took her to have an abortion, not caring about the consequences. Tife lost her will to continue her studies. She dropped out of school and withdrew from the entire world. Her parents, seeing that she had decided not to further her education, introduced her to Chief Adewale, a man who was 20 years older than Tife. He was a very wealthy man who piqued an interest in her and wanted to marry her. Tife's parents convinced her to marry him, saying that doing so would bring their family out of poverty. Desperate for acceptance, Tife agreed, but her marriage was loveless. Chief Adewale was distant, and the years passed with no sign of children. The abortion she was forced to have had taken away her ability to conceive. Her husband grew colder over time, and his family treated her like a burden. Tife lived with the crushing guilt of her past and the emptiness of her present. Every smile on Yemisi's face reminded Tife of the life that she could have had, the love, the joy, the freedom to make her own choices. She saw Yemisi as the golden child, the one who escaped their parents' harsh control and got to live the life of her dreams. In Tife's eyes, it wasn't fair. She saw Yemisi's success, her happiness, and her pregnancy as a deliberate reminder of everything that she had lost. So, she poured her frustration on Yemisi, the one person who had loved her unconditionally. Yemisi had become a scapegoat for all the pain, regret, and unhealed wounds that Tife had endured. But standing there, staring at her sister's lifeless body, Tife realized the heavy weight of her choices and misplaced anger. She decided to let it all go, knowing that the damage had already been done. She apologized to Yemisi's husband for how badly she treated them. She narrated the whole story to him, tears pouring down her face as she confessed every detail: the abortion, the rejection of Obiora, her forced marriage to Chief Adewale, and the deep scars that had shaped her bitterness. Yemisi's husband listened intently, his eyes softening as he saw the shattered woman that was right before him. "Tife," he said gently, "I forgive you. Yemisi loved you so much, and she would want you to find peace." Tife broke down in tears as she felt a flicker of relief in his forgiveness. She devoted herself to caring for her niece Tifeoluwa, and in those quiet moments, as she held the baby in her arms, she began to feel something that she hadn't felt in years: love, pure and undiluted love. However, life wasn't done testing Tife. Chief Adewale, who had long grown tired of her presence, married another woman, a younger, more vibrant bride, chosen by his family. One fateful afternoon, Tife returned home to find her belongings packed in bags on the doorstep. "You are no longer welcome here," her husband said coldly, without meeting her eyes. His new wife stood in the background smirking. His family had ensured that every legal document was in his favor. Tife had no claim to anything, not the house, not the wealth, and certainly not his loyalty. Broken and humiliated, Tife returned to her parents' home with only a small bag of clothes. Her mother welcomed her silently, guilt etched on her face, while her father avoided her gaze entirely. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of her failures pressed heavily on her. Desperate to escape her own thoughts, Tife decided to visit her niece, hoping that the baby's smile might bring her some comfort. When she arrived at Yemisi's husband's house, she knocked hesitantly, clutching a small teddy bear in her hand. The door opened, and there stood a tall man, his presence commanding yet warm. "Tife," he said in disbelief. Tife froze, staring at the familiar face. "Obiora," she whispered. It was him, her Obiora. His hair was shorter, streaked with faint signs of grey, but his deep eyes were still as kind as she remembered. "I didn't know you would be here," Tife stammered. Obiora smiled faintly. I came to visit my cousin. After I returned from abroad, I had no idea his wife was your sister, or that you were the same Tife I once loved. The air between them cracked with unspoken words, years of pain and regret hanging heavily in the silence. Please come in, Obiora said softly. Inside, little Tifeoluwa was sleeping peacefully in her crib. Obiora glanced at her and smiled. She looks just like Yemisi. She's beautiful. Tife felt tears prick her eyes. They sat down in the living room, and for the first time in decades, Tife shared everything with Obiora. The pain, the guilt, the years of isolation and bitterness. Obiora listened, his eyes filled with compassion. Tife, he said after a long pause, you were failed by so many people, but it's not too late to rewrite your story. Tife nodded as tears streamed down her face. Obiora had spent his years focused on his work that he never had time for women. He was now a successful medical doctor, and Tife could not believe how life had smiled on him. Over the next few weeks, Obiora and Tife began to rebuild their connection. He visited often, spending time with little Tifeoluwa and shared stories with Tife. Slowly, the walls Tife had built around her heart began to crumble, and for the first time in years, she felt truly seen and understood. Obiora was gentle, patient, and kind, never rushing Tife to confront emotions that she wasn't ready for. His presence brought a quiet calmness to the chaotic world. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Obiora asked Tife if she remembered when they used to sit under the mango tree by her house, talking about their dreams. Tife smiled faintly, her gaze distant. Yes, you always said you wanted to become a doctor, and I wanted to become a lawyer. Obiora looked at her intently. You deserve happiness, Tife. You've been carrying this pain for so long, and it's time to let it go. We can't change the past, but we can choose what happens next. Tife looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. Obiora, I don't know if I can. I'm so broken. I've made so many mistakes. Obiora gently took her hand. We are all broken in some way, Tife, but sometimes the crack is what lets the light in. As months passed, Tife gradually opened herself up to healing. She focused on caring for her niece Tifeoluwa, showering her with all the love that she had in her heart. Obiora was always there, offering support, encouragement, and warmth. One evening, Obiora invited Tife to his home. It was a quiet evening, and Obiora had taken the time to prepare dinner. Tife was so delighted. They sat and ate, as Obiora reminded Tife of all the beautiful times that they had in the past. Tife could not help but giggle at the stories that brought back so many memories. Obiora then handed a small box to her as he watched her open it with a smile. Tife, I have loved you since we were young. Despite everything that happened, that love never died. I know we can't erase the past, but we can build a new future together. Will you let me love you? Will you let me stand by your side and help you heal? Tife's hands trembled as she opened the box to find a ring. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time in years, Tife felt something warm and pure. Yes, Obiora, she whispered through her tears, as Obiora screamed out in excitement. Tife and Obiora took their time building their life together. They didn't rush into marriage, but instead focused on healing and creating beautiful memories. Tife gradually reconciled with her parents. Her mother racked with guilt, worked hard to make amends, while her father, though slower to express his regret, began to show subtle signs of remorse through his actions. Chief Adewale, on the other hand, spiraled into financial troubles as his new wife squandered his wealth and eloped with her lover. Karma, it seemed, had found its way back to him, but Tife no longer carried hatred or bitterness in her heart. She had found peace in the love she shared with Obiora and the joy that came with it. They got married, and Tife found out months later that she was pregnant. Obiora had put her on a fertility treatment that worked, and Tife was now carrying her own child. The news came as a miracle, one that brought tears of joy to Tife's eyes. She clutched the pregnancy test tightly, her hands trembling, as she whispered some heartfelt thanks to God. Obiora was also delighted. He pulled her into his arms as they held each other tightly, their tears mixing with laughter. "This child is our blessing, Tife," Obiora said softly. "A fresh start, a sign that love can heal even the deepest wounds." The months that followed were filled with laughter as Tife finally gave birth to twin babies. Her years of suffering finally ended as Tife lived the remainder of her life in joy. Her husband and children filled the void that she never knew could be filled. Her parents learned the bitter lesson never to sacrifice their children's happiness for societal approval. Tife's life was shaped by her parents' decisions, driven by societal expectations and fear of shame. Their insistence on aborting her pregnancy and rejecting the man that she loved led to years of bitterness, regret, and suffering. Therefore, this story teaches us that parental decisions, driven by societal pressure and fear of shame, can have devastating consequences on their children's lives. It highlights the importance of allowing children to make choices rooted in love and happiness rather than societal expectations. Bitterness and unresolved trauma can destroy relationships and prevent healing, while forgiveness, unconditional love, and self reflection are powerful tools for breaking free from cycles of pain. The story also emphasizes that it's never too late for redemption, healing, and second chances, and that love, both romantic and familial, has the power to restore even the most broken hearts. Finally, it serves as a reminder that true happiness comes from embracing love, letting go of resentment, and choosing to build a future free from the chains of the past.